So, it's been a rough few weeks, but here's the first video. And we're going to do it on the PlayStation. And I'll probably look over the manual a little bit. It's got a couple of interesting things on it. For a brief overview of the PlayStation, it was released in Japan in 1994 and in the US in 1995. And according to the internet, it competed with Nintendo 64 and the Sega Saturn. Although, from my memory, it was mostly the Nintendo 64. People still talked about the Sega Genesis at the time. Well, kids in my school still talked about the Sega Genesis. I got it the year after in 1996. I remember because there was a pretty big blizzard. The story about the PlayStation is one I'm pretty sure everyone's heard. It started out as kind of a project they were working with other companies to produce a CD ROM reading format for other video game companies, and then I think they got backstabbed a couple times and ended up deciding, hey, we're just going to do it ourselves. Why not? And became one of the most successful video game consoles ever. And then spawned the PlayStation 2, which was equally as successful, but more successful. PlayStation 3, which at that point it was really kind of just a competition between them and Xbox. The PS4, which really dominated the market. And now the PS5, which I've seen mixed messages on whether it was actually successful. I mean, obviously it was successful because it made them money, but whether it was the as successful as the previous generations. The games that entrenched it and made it super successful were Crash Bandicoot, the Final Fantasy series, particularly Final Fantasy VII, and all the Squaresoft games. And then you've got Tomb Raider, which I never really played, Resident Evil, that was a really big one. And one people don't really talk about as much anymore, at least I don't see it online, but was super. Everyone in my school talked about it, which was Twisted Metal. And then you had the Tony Hawk series come out, but that was on all the systems. It wasn't exclusive. I'm not sure if Twisted Metal was exclusive, but it was. When people talked about PlayStation in my school, they always talked about Twisted Metal. I haven't gone back. I haven't played that since I was a kid, so I don't know how that holds up. But it was different. The main drawback I remember as a kid was the loading time because it was a CD, and needing cartridges to save your game. So, the PlayStation has a pretty basic, simple look to it. I am in the process. I've got 3 of them. One, my original one, which I just kind of keep safe. One I bought later when I couldn't find the original one, and that one's like torn apart because I was redoing I was going to do a custom paint job on the outside. And then this one, which I inherited, you could say, from my grandparents. It was the one that we would play on when we went to visit them in the summers. Theirs had kind of a yellowing. You can't really see it with the camera. It has kind of it's the difference between the bottom and the top, at least in this lighting, you can't really see it a whole lot. You can kind of tell, but not really. It had that yellowing that happens to plastic, but the one I had when I was a kid, even though it's been through multiple states, multiple moves, and has been in use since the mid-90s, hasn't had any discoloration. And the one I bought online didn't have any discoloration, but they probably like refurbished it or cleaned it or whatever. So, but this one did, and this one's mostly been just sitting in a cupboard for 30 30 years. Oh boy. Yeah, this one's been sitting in a cupboard and it has the yellow coloration. I don't know why mine didn't when it was moved around all the time, but yeah. The memory cartridges, I don't know if I have any of my original ones. I have some PlayStation 2 ones and the one that my grandparents had. So this is the original PlayStation controller. It is a beauty. I still love to hold it in my hand. It feels a little light and a little small compared to the newer controllers, but it's just probably one of the best controllers. And I don't know if that's a selling point, but I like a lot of weird controllers. Like I love the Dreamcast controller, but that's probably just nostalgia because it's not the most comfortable controller. It has a nice look to it, but it's not excellent. This, on the other hand, is so perfect. That's why they hardly changed it in the various generations. They added analog sticks towards the end of the PlayStation with PlayStation 2, and then some other stuff. But the main shape has stayed the same because it's just such a nice controller. This is the current controller I use, which is for the PS2. It's a silver one, though. It's not like an original PlayStation. Well, it is. It's a Sony one, but it's not the one that came with the PlayStation 2. And I like it. I feel probably most comfortable with the PS2 controller. I've used it the most. But there's also a feeling I get when I hold the original one that is just pure nostalgia, and it just takes me back to my childhood. Now, as for the manual, it's interesting. I should have the PS4 manual that I have, but it's in a box of 30 or more boxes somewhere in my house, and I'm not going to try to look for it just for this video. So this is the one that my grandparents had. I did not keep any of the stuff. They kept the manual and a bunch of other stuff that came with it. They didn't have the original box, but it's interesting to see the way it's set up. It gives a lot of little details, things that you might think are common sense, and information that's kind of funny in retrospect because they're talking about TVs being too old, and now that's not exactly a problem, but we're getting closer to that being an issue with the PS1 being set up for TVs that are too old. I use a CRT, or I have a hookup to my computer. And it's much nicer to play on an old TV than it is to play on the computer, but it's also easier to record on a computer than, I don't know, use a VHS tape and then take that VHS tape and transfer it to the computer. But let's see. Basic electronic information. The little diagrams that are in this are kind of funny. They're kind of interesting. I guess you should make sure not to be walking around in the rain with your I can't even see what I'm looking at. Don't walk around in the rain with your PlayStation. Even with an umbrella, it could get wet. So, careful about that. Here's the diagram of them showing the different ways to hook it up, and how if your TV is older, you might not be able to use the PlayStation. And now, if your TV's older, if your TV's too new, you might not be able to use the PlayStation. And then basic advice, don't touch it. That's how you put it in a thing. Stuff like that. It's, I think, common sense, but at the same time, if you've never used CDs and before, then I guess that's good advice. And now we're getting to the point where, because everything is digital, it might be good advice in the future for people handling retro gaming stuff. It has a little bit about the using it for audio stuff. That's a big thing back in the day, and actually was a very successful method for the PS2, was to market your video game system as a home entertainment console. And so the start of that was being able to play music. And then with the PS2, you had DVDs. So now you can watch movies and play music. And I think it's kind of moved away from that because of either cost and competitions with PCs, building a computer, or just because that's just, everyone can stream Netflix from their phone now and listen to music on, like, it's too easy. So there's not as much of a demand in the market for a whole home entertainment console when everyone's phone is an entertainment console minus the ability to play decent video games. The games I currently have are Cool Borders, Hot Wheels game. Those two were both from my grandparents. Final Fantasy VII. I'm going to be doing a playthrough of that soon. Harvest Moon. Love that game. This was the very first. Pretty sure it's the very first game I got when I started collecting PlayStation stuff again. And then Chrono Cross, which it's probably number 2 on PlayStation for me as favorite games. But that game loves to have problems loading the first scene, and so even though there's hardly a scratch on those CDs, I can't play those games. The one I desperately want but can't really afford to get is Legend of Mana. That's my number 1 favorite PlayStation game. And everything about the way the PlayStation was such a beautiful artistic endeavor. Just from the startup screen, just everything about it was awesome. For a long time, I would say I was a default Sony fanboy. I've had every system except the PS5. And I basically abandoned Sony during the PS5 because I had the money together for the first time in my life, and thanks to scalpers and shortages, supposedly, I couldn't buy one. And I'm not going to sit around waiting trying to buy a PlayStation for months and months at a time. I just wanted to play the game I just wanted to play the system for the first time in my life. I've always gotten, because I've never had much money, so the PlayStation I got a year after it came out. The PS2 I got like 2 years after it came out, and I had to break my wrist to get it. Literally broke my wrist to get the PlayStation 2. Take out double insurance, and so when you're injured, one of the insurances will pay for the medical stuff, and the other one you can take the cash and buy a PlayStation 2. So that I did that at 13, and then the PS3 I got two or 3 years after it came out. Me and my best friend pooled our money together to get it. And the PS4 I was given again 3 or 4 years after it came out. And so the PS5, that was going to be this time for once I'm going to get the new PlayStation system. This is going to be my big thing. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it right when it comes out. And that event killed my fanboy shipness with Sony. I still love old Sony, but also, dumping thousands of dollars into a PC, there's not much of a draw anymore. Really, truly, I was a Sega fanboy, but we know what happened with Sega, so there's that. Dreamcast is my favorite system of all time, and that was the death of Sega. So that's about it. I'm just gonna keep this short, and the usual stuff people say at the end of a video: like it, subscribe to it, don't like it, comment on how stupid I am, whatever floats your boat.